Hi, I'm William Spaniel. Let's learn about international relations. Today's topic is, where does terrorism fester? This lecture is going to transition us from our discussion on terrorism to our discussion on insurgency. Remember that this unit is on both terrorism and insurgency. And the reason that this unit is throwing those two things together, and what we're going to be arguing here, is that if you want to study terrorism, you necessarily must be studying insurgency as well. And so the big question for this lecture is, if you want to stop terrorism at its source, where do you go? The United States' misadventures for the past decade provide a good indication about where we should go. So starting with Afghanistan here, Afghanistan has been in a state of civil war since basically forever, and Iraq has been in a state of war, civil war since 2003. What's really important to note here with Iraq is that before 2003, there weren't a bunch of terrorists in Iraq. After 2003, there were. And the reason is because of this. Terrorists can thrive in the absence of a strong centralized government. When there is a strong centralized government, then that strong centralized government has incentive to go and root out all those terrorists and kill them and jail them and so forth. The reasons are twofold. One, you don't really want to have another group of power challenging perhaps your power within your country. So if you're strong, you want to go get them. And also, if you're worried about other guys in other countries, then you want to avoid that spoiling problem. And the way you do that is by going and getting the terrorists before they cause a spoiling problem elsewhere. So if you have a strong centralized government, you don't have terrorists. But in the absence of a strong centralized government, terrorists can essentially survive, they can grow, they can train, they can do all those sorts of bad things. Essentially, they can become a festering problem in the absence of a strong centralized government. Now, civil wars create weak governments. Right? By ongoing fighting, this is weakening both sides. This is destroying all those institutions within a government, and so the civil war is creating a weak government. And it's also an evidence of a weak government too, right? So if there's a party that realizes that, hey, there's this weak government here, they might want to start a civil war because they think that they can win it because of the fact that there's this weak government here. So civil wars are definitely correlated with weak government. And there's also this potential for grievance here, where if a civil war is breaking out, then it's possible that one side or both sides have a legitimate grievance against the other. And so this is causing them to actually have a legitimate reason to be conducting attacks against one another. And if things are going poorly for one side, then one side might have to resort to committing terrorist attacks in order to be able to continue. Essentially, they need to start an insurgency, hide out in some mountains, and so forth. Now, this is all bad if you want to stop terrorism. So what's the solution here? Well, if you want to stop terrorism, you might have to stop civil wars and insurgencies. The reason you need to do this is because you have to build up strong centralized governments, and you can't do that with a civil war going on. So you need to stop these civil wars and these insurgencies. But then we now know the solution, but this begs another question here, which is, how do you stop civil wars and insurgencies? And that's what we're going to be taking care of now. We need to discuss, and we need to analyze, and we need to know the underlying causes of ongoing civil conflict. Why do civil conflicts persist for as long as they do? And that's what we're going to be discussing in the next couple of lectures. And actually, in the next lecture, as I often do, instead of going directly to the issue, I'm going to give an analogy in the next lecture. And what we'll be seeing after that is that this analogy perfectly transfers into the logic of ongoing civil war. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I'll see you next time when I talk about my ordeal in Texas when I was suspected by some police officers of being a drug dealer. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you then. Take care.